us traveling in the world of my creation. What we'll see will defy explanation.
Hello and welcome to A Real Point of View. And our show today is a salute to the one and only Gene Wilder. My name is Greg Morgan and I am your host for today's show. And joining me is the incomparable movie maven herself, Miss Karen D. How you doing, Karen?
I'm doing great, Greg. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah. A big shock to hear the news about one of my favorite comedic actors, the passing of Gene Wilder. Were you equally as saddened as I was, Karen?
Oh, sure. He was 83, so he wasn't a young man. He died of complications from Alzheimer's, so that was definitely sad. Although I was reading some news accounts that said that, it was strange, although that's what he died from, the Alzheimer's somehow didn't affect his ability to recognize his family members. So his family didn't have to go through that, special kind of hell where you're trying to get somebody that you love to actually recognize you. Somehow it didn't affect him like that. So that was a blessing. And, we all have the, one-way ticket on this crazy, spinning planet. So, well, I'm glad that he was here for as long as he was. His career spanned over 50 years.
Yeah. Midwest boy from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So,
right.
We don't hear
his mother came from Illinois.
That's right. And Illinois is special to us, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so, we always hear about these movie stars in Hollywood and coming from New York or all these other seemingly intra-stated exotic places other than like Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Right.
But here is a guy who, by all accounts, was a pretty smart guy, pretty intelligent guy.
Yes.
Very affable guy. And a really good writer, not just screenplays, but he's written a few books, and even his memoirs came out around 2005 approximately.
Right.
And then, of course, one of his relationships, he had, I think, more than one wife, but one of his relationships that
he had two wives.
Played out so largely in the media was the love affair and relationship with Gilda Radner from Saturday Night Live, who was one of my favorite characters on that show during that time. Jim Belushi and Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd's time on Saturday Night Live, and she was a delight to me watching her, and I know he loved her deeply. So
yeah, she was one of my favorite actors on that. She, Dan Aykroyd, Jim Belushi sort of represent like the golden age of Saturday Night Live. I don't know if it's, when Eddie Murphy was on, there's like another possible time like that, but it just,
he's like on the latter part of the other people's time, but I think he was after Gilda Radner.
He was. That's why I said it. I think that might have been another time that might be considered a really like a special great time in the evolution in the history of Saturday Night Live. That's a program that's been on TV for I think over 40 years. There were many times over that 40-year period when I said, why don't they just kill this thing already? But it wasn't. But it certainly wasn't during when Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, Gilda Radner, Jane Curtin, when they were on there, it was absolutely brilliant. So,
well, let me ask you a few questions. Of the different movies that span this long period of time for Gene Wilder's success, Any couple too that you really, really liked?
Oh my
I
God.
have like a couple too that I really liked a lot.
Well, yes. I absolutely positively adored him in Young Frankenstein. That's one of my all-time. That movie is absolutely brilliant in terms of a comedic movie. Absolutely brilliant. It's probably Mel Brooks' best film. Gene Wilder not only starred in that film, but he wrote the film. He co-wrote it with Mel Brooks, and it was his first time writing a screenplay, and he was nominated for an Academy Award for
There you
best
go.
screenplay.
So that's what I'm talking about. That's star power right there.
That's star power, and that's just, like you said, he was very intelligent. He's no slouch at all, and a really good writer. I'm hard pressed to think of anybody else who could write a screenplay the first time and become a darling of the Academy.
Right.
So that's saying a lot. But oh my God, he was just so good in that movie. And then I don't know, my other favorite movie with him is Blazing Saddles. That's just one of my favorite movies, period. I loved Cleavon Little in that movie, and Harvey Korman, and Mel Brooks was in that movie too, and Slim Pickens, and Gene Wilder was the Waco Kid, and
Alex Karras.
Alex Karras was in that movie. It was just that movie. I remember being in the movies, in the theater, watching that movie. And I think I was with some friends who got really upset with me because I was laughing so loudly, and they were like, "This is really embarrassing." So, but it's funny. It's really funny. I mean, I think I was laughing louder than anybody else in the theater.
It was hilarious. This is one of the funniest movies because it combines dry humor, physical humor. It just had all these different elements, and it was just funny because the wording in the script was so well done, especially Harvey Korman. He was cracking me up.
Oh my goodness, yes.
He was talking so fast. He was doing all these things. He was so evil that it was funny. He was so evil.
Right,
and
right.
Yet at the same time, Slim Pickens, who was much more of a icon in this movie because of his acting time when he was really, really popular, was good 20, 30 years prior to this movie.
Right.
And the fact that he was in this movie, he was so funny. And here's a guy who was more of a dramatic actor, more of a Western cowboy actor, a true cowboy. And he was hilarious in this movie.
Yes, he really was. He really was. I mean, yeah, it just goes down as, I think it's one of the best comedies ever, like in the history of Hollywood cinema, and the history of cinematic films. There aren't that. I mean, there are some great comedies. There are a number of comedies that are great comedies, but I would put that as one of them. That and Young Frankenstein are two that I would, expect to be in a pantheon of the great comedies ever created by the Hollywood film industry. And there are a few others that certainly belong there. But yeah, just brilliant. I mean, it's Mel Brooks at his finest. And, Mel Brooks is really, in my opinion, Mel Brooks is brilliant, but the path to his comedies doesn't always run smoothly. There are just things that just don't work that well. I mean, he's had projects and things that he's done, like The History of the World would be one that I would point to, parts 1 and 2 and 3, I think, where it was just like it was like you're working the bone and you're driving me crazy, and you need to stop working that bone, because it's like not only are you riding the dead horse, but like the dead horse is past dead. So stop doing that, So not everything he did worked, but in this particular in those two instances, Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein, it's like up the perfect marriage of his zany kind of humor and political commentary, because there's political commentary in both of those films, social commentary. And it just, it really worked well. And, those movies are 50, almost 50 years old, over 40 years old, and they still stand the test of time.
They do. And I've seen excerpts from each of these films over and over again, just to remind myself that there was true comedy where things that people said were just as funny without having to be lewd or crass or anything like that. It was just, this was crazy funny comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Gene Wilder just had a knack for portraying these different characters that he played, and you just got a laugh out of it. And the fact that these people are keeping these straight faces is amazing.
I don't know how they did that.
I don't either.
They had to have cut. They had to have cut and just like had everybody just like laugh themselves silly for like 5 minutes. And it's like, okay, we're taking 5 minutes. Everybody laugh, get it out of your system, because when the cameras roll, we need to like get this baby down. And no laughing. I can't imagine that.
I saw this clip of Young Frankenstein, by the way. I think you've been pronouncing it wrong all this time.
Oh, stop.
I've seen the clips of Young Frankenstein, and I thought it was pretty funny, especially the banter between Gene Wilder and Marty Feldman.
Oh, yes.
And as not Igor, but Igor.
Right.
So Dr. Frankenstein and Igor going back and forth. And it's just so funny because they're trying to do this work and they kept laughing.
Right.
They kept laughing. And no matter what they did, one person would say something and like Marty Feldman would do something silly and crazy and they'd all start laughing. Or Gene Wilder would say something and they're trying to stay, focused, and the focus itself just keeps breaking down. And that happened time and time and time again. So I agree with you. There's a lot of film that's laying on the floor somewhere, totally wasted because of the fact that they just couldn't stop laughing. And
Right.
It seemed like it was like they get one line out and then they start laughing. Then they tried that line again and they got it, and then the next line they start laughing. I mean,
Right.
that must have been a fun set.
It must have been hilarious. And Madeline Kahn was in Young Frankenstein, and Cloris Leachman, two other brilliant actresses, and they were hilarious. And also Peter, oh God, what's his name?
Peter Doyle.
Peter Boyle.
Boyle.
Yes.
As the monster.
Absolutely priceless. I don't know who else could have done that, the monster, the way that he did. And one of my favorite scenes from that movie was, when they did Putting on the Ritz.
I liked it when he met the blind man.
Oh my God, Gene Hackman is the blind man.
I know, isn't that crazy?
Priceless. Absolutely priceless. Would you like some soup?
He's like, don't try to talk. I understand. Don't try to talk. I too have inflections, but don't try to talk. Here,
right.
Here's a candle. No, ooh, he burned his hand.
I know. Yeah.
No, I don't have that. I don't have any dough, but we can.
It's like, how did they? I don't know how they did that. I would have been on the floor. They would have had to throw me off the set. It's like you can't work because you're laughing too much.
And when they're trying to bring the body to life and they start hitting it repeatedly over and over and over, this is gonna work. I don't know why it's not working. I don't know. And the monster's like, I'm alive, okay? I'm alive and you're beating me to death.
Right. Exactly. If you don't stop trying to make me alive, you're gonna kill me here.
That was too funny. I just thought that was hilarious. It was just such a very funny movie.
Oh, the movie was just, and it was brilliantly filmed too. The black and white film, and just the brilliant play on the real elements of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And just sort of playing them out to their logical conclusion, which lent itself to comedic effect. Like the.
Mm-hmm. Uh-oh. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. It looks like we're a little frozen here for a moment.
Where, he and Madeline Kahn are, they're in the living room and he's reading the paper and she's like, sweet mystery of life, come on. He's like, oh yeah, give it a rest already. I need to feed my mind. You're wearing me out. Oh my goodness. And Terry Garr was also just hilarious in that movie.
There's a scene where Marty Feldman, Madeline Kahn drives up in her limousine, and Terry Garr is standing behind Gene Wilder, and he's introducing her because Madeline Kahn's his fiance, and so he's introducing her to both Igor and Terry Garr's character, and Igor notices that Madeline Kahn has this fox fur around her neck, and so he bites it. He goes, "Arr, arr." And then so Gene Wilder just like, Igor, get that out of your mouth! Stop that! He goes, now pick up he says, I need you to pick up the bags. He says, the two bags. He goes, okay, I'll take this bag and you take the blonde.
Right. Oh, God.
So it's just a really good movie.
No, but my favorite scene in that movie was when he tells Igor to get him a brain for for the monster. He's like, okay, get me a brain, and I've got a selection of brains, so make sure you go, get me the right brain for the monster. And he's like, yes, master. And he goes off to the lab and he's like, oh, I don't know what brain to pick. Gee. Oh, here's one. AB normal. Abby, this is the one I'll take. And he gives it to him. And he puts it in, Frankenstein puts it in the monster, but the monster's kind of acting a little strange. And he finally says to Igor, yep. Remember when I asked you to get that brain? He's like, yes. Well, what brain did you give me? I had said, AB normal. AB normal? You mean Abby? You mean abnormal? Abby normal. Abnormal. That's not the brain of the. No wonder he's acting so strange, and then he just practically pulverizes him. Like, well, that normal, in there, you should have been more specific.
Yeah, that's
like
just
genius. Abby normal. I'll go with Abby normal.
Just a hilarious set of circumstances.
Oh my goodness, it was too funny, too funny.
And it's funny. The Blazing Saddles. I'm just going to jump there for a moment. In Blazing Saddles, it reminded me years ago when in the city of Chicago, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening out there, there was a mayor of Chicago named Harold Washington. And when he was being elected, he had all these protesters out there trying to, for him, against him, all this stuff. And so a newscaster, which they faithfully do often, go up to people and ask them questions, which I don't know why they continue to do it. It's just not the smart thing to do. But they go up and ask these people questions, and they ask this guy, he was just shouting, no deal, no deal. He says, so sir, what is it about the deal that you don't you're against and against? He goes, well, no deal, no deal. And the crowd goes, no deal, no deal. But it didn't seem like anybody knew what they were talking about. So in the essence of Blazing Saddles, we have horrendously, 20, 30 different crowd scenes
Yes.
about the whole film, and nobody knows what they're talking about.
Right.
They always sway to whatever one person says. Shoot him! Everybody goes, shoot him, shoot him. And somebody goes, no, don't shoot him. No, don't shoot him.
Right.
Well, yeah, let's hang him, hang him. No,
Right.
no, let's chop his head off. Yeah, let's chop his head off. Let's do that. And the part I thought was really hilarious. So they've got guns on Cleavon Little. He's on the gallery or wherever.
He was Sheriff Bart.
He was sheriff, and so they've got guns on him, and they say, well, we're going to shoot him. And he pulls out his own gun, and he points it to himself and says, watch it, don't do it. He'll do it, he'll shoot himself. And they go, wait a minute. We need to back up, because if we don't, he's going to shoot himself. Now, weren't they about to shoot him themselves?
And then they back up really slowly.
He's like, I'm
going
to do it.
Afraid that he's good.
I'm going to do it. I just thought that was hilarious.
That was hilarious. I just, oh my God. And Gene Wilder was like this drunken kind of has-been of a cowboy. He was just snockered the entire time. And, and he just played that to brilliant effect. Oh my God, he was so funny. It's a Waco kid.
He was a once worthy gunslinger who was on hard times the whole time. So Cleavon Little has him in the jail, and he has him strung up by his feet inside the jail cell.
Right.
And so he goes, so Cleavon Little goes to Gene Wilder. He goes, so are you awake? And Gene Wilder goes, I don't know. Am I? He said, well, you tell me. He's like, well, are you black? And he says, yes. He goes, then I'm awake. Although I don't know how I got in this circumstance, because he was so drunk, he's thinking, am I just hanging in suspended animation?
Right.
And I like this one scene where the two of them are talking in the jail, and he's talking about his gunslinger days. He's like, I don't know about being able to draw my gun. I haven't done it in a long time. He said, see my hand? He showed him his right hand. He said, Cleavon Little goes, wow, that's stiff as a board. And then he says, yeah, but I swing, I do my gunslinger with this hand, and the hand's just going rapidly.
Right. Oh my goodness, just hilarious. I love that film. I love Blazing Saddles. I've seen it numerous times. I could watch it all over again in a New York minute.
Another cool film, which I thought was pretty fun, and I've got a picture here I'd like to show. This is Silver Streak.
Silver Streak. One of the last great train films.
Right. Funny train films.
One of the last great funny train films.
Yeah.
Scatman Crothers was the conductor, and Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder in the first of, I think, 4 collaborations. Jill Clayburgh was the love interest, and I think now that Gene Wilder has passed on, maybe Silver Streak will get like another sort of, another like round of consideration, because it's probably one of those films that is better in retrospect. Mm-hmm. I remember it had mixed reviews at the box office, and critics were sort of like, some thought it was great and others thought it was, okay. What everybody seemed to agree on was just like the special effects of the train were just awesome.
It was. It was when it crashed into the train station. That was cool.
That was awesome, and that was like, and you know, it was set. The story was set like the trains met in Chicago.
Right.
So that was like what was it, Union Station
Union Station.
Yeah, it was like, oh, that's spectacular, just spectacular.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
But it was it was so funny, and of course, you know, the classic. I'm not even sure that a person could put these scenes in a film today in the age of political correctness, but you know what scene I'm talking about, where they're trying to get away from, you know, from the cops and the crooks at the same time, and Gene Wilder's like, I don't know how I'm going to get off this train. I got to get off this train. And Richard Pryor's like, all right, I can get you off this train. And he's like,
because it was a white guy traveling with a black guy. So they had to do something to change that motif.
Right. So he brings him into the bathroom, the men's room, and pulls clothes from somewhere. I can't remember where he got the clothes from. And I don't know if he pulled out a bottle of shoe polish.
Well, you know, inside the bathrooms, the men's bathrooms, they have a person who waits on you with wet hot towels, and they also shine your shoes in the bathroom. So there was black shoe polish sitting there. Yeah. Somehow Gene Wilder came out looking very brown for the use of black shoe polish. But then it was sort of like, so then he's like, okay, just, you know, like, act black. You know, and Gene Wilder's like, you know, boombox, running all over the, you know, making a total ass out of himself. And Richard Pryor's like, with this guy, oh my God, he's an embarrassment to all the races. He's like, what can I do, my man? Carrying a boombox. Yeah. And of course, he didn't carry it like, you know, the days the people in the Times carried it. He's carrying it almost first, like, oh yeah. Everybody's looking at him.
Right. And then he's trying to do like this pimp walk, but it looks more like the Charleston.
Right. Fun times with Gene Wilder, man.
Totally fun. And you know, one of the things that we said in the way of introducing this movie or this discussion for this evening is that Gene Wilder is one of the few actors who could hold his own with Richard Pryor, because Richard Pryor just, I mean, he was like this enormous talent. I mean, he was like a comet, like lightning or whatever. And I don't know what, you know, whether he was, you know, in the middle of drugs when he did this work or not. Maybe it came after that. I don't know. But I mean, just lightning quick, especially when it comes to comedy. And, you know, he could completely just overwhelm. I mean, he could just totally run roughshod over anybody, a lesser actor or a less experienced actor, or just one who didn't understand how to play these roles. And I think my view is that what Gene Wilder did and what made it so brilliant and what helped him every single time was that he went to the honesty of the role. So it wasn't, and it was almost like at some point you don't care what the other people around you think, including your co-star. So, you know, it's like if you're this like really nerdy white guy who's all of a sudden kind of like in brown or black shoe polish, and you've got to like get out of a situation, then you're just going to get out of that, and you're just going to get out of it the best way you know how. And if that makes you look stupid, well. Right. So I think that's, you know, I can't think of any performance that he's given, and he's been in movies both good and bad, you know, but his performance always struck me as an honest performance. And to me, he was, you know, pretty much always believable no matter who, no matter what kind of character he was doing. And because he went straight to the heart of this, this person. I think he approached comedy the way that dramatic actors approach their characters. He approached comedy very seriously. And it's like, okay, and the first rule is that the person who's in a comedy doesn't know they're in a comedy.
Right.
They think it's serious. That's the comedy. That's what's so funny is that, I mean, if he thinks it's funny, if he's laughing with us, we're not laughing as much because we don't have the joy of this person truly being in the situation. When the person is laughing about the situation they're in, they've already taken themselves out of the situation. Mm-hmm. Gene Wilder never took himself out of the situation. He was always smack dab in the situation. And that's what made his comedic turn so brilliant. There's one other role of his. I'd forgotten that it was him and played it, but I forgot that it was him, but I never forgot the role. And this is in a movie that was done, predated Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles. It's a Woody Allen movie called Everything You Always Want to Know About Sex But Were Afraid to Ask. Mm-hmm. And he played, there's the role of a doctor in this movie. And everything you always want to know about sex but were afraid to ask is like a sort of a series of vignettes, like 7 vignettes that have to do with people sort of trying to understand or deal with sex in some form or fashion. Mm-hmm. And Gene Wilder played this doctor who was in love with a sheep. I mean, he was desperately in love with a sheep. And I mean, that was the funniest part of that movie to me. I was on the floor. He was so funny because he's looking for ways to take the sheep out on a date, to get the sheep to sleep in the bed with him, because the sheep wasn't necessarily like willing to get in the bed with him, and he would feel rejected and hurt because the sheep wasn't giving him what he wanted, and really, a sheep.
But the irony is, and what made it so much more funny is he approached the character as if it was a woman. Yes,
that's exactly what he did.
And so therefore, everything that he did wouldn't have been abnormal, wouldn't have been abnormal in any other circumstance but this one.
Right.
And that's how you play it. That was perfect.
Right.
Perfectly played. And I think people don't give him enough credit for being a dramatic actor. We were talking about that a little earlier in a film where at least let me rephrase that. At least I had forgotten he was in this movie. And with all the big stars that were in this particular film, we had Warren Beatty, Faye Dunaway, Gene Hackman again, this Jennifer Pyle. I mean, the movie, which was really a great movie, I thought was one of Warren Beatty's better movies, actually, was Bonnie and Clyde.
Yep.
And here we have Gene Wilder in this very dramatic, somewhat of a biopic.
Small but memorable role.
Small but memorable and poignant role in this particular film. And
he plays a funeral director, right?
I think so. And you're abacked by the fact because everybody's looking at it, it's Gene Wilder. But when you hear him speak and when you hear him performing his role, that's not what you see. You don't see the comedic actor anymore. And and I think that's great because you want to be versatile, but at the same time you want to be able to affect the audience the best way you can. And in this particular role, it doesn't always have to be big. We know that from a lot of the films that we've critiqued in the past. It doesn't have to be a big role. It just has to be poignant for you to be noticed and for it to matter. Right. And that's what you're looking for a lot of times from a dramatic actor and an actor who was starting to come into his own back then.
Right. And Bonnie and Clyde, that movie was released in 1967. So he had done some movies before that, but he was also a veteran of the Broadway stage. And it was there that he forged the relationships that basically dictated the course of his life in a very fortunate way. It was there, it was on the Broadway stage that he met doing a play with Anne Bancroft. And Bancroft at the time was dating Mel Brooks, but they would later on become married. And because of his friendship with Anne Bancroft and then with Mel Brooks, he became part of that stable of actors that Mel Brooks would rely on, because we've talked about this before. There are some directors who they have their go-tos, they have their stable of actors that they want to work with almost all the time in some way, shape, or form. Alfred Hitchcock had his stable. Mel Brooks had his stable, and there were other directors that did that sort of thing, and then other directors that who never had like a core group that they always went to. You never knew who they were going to work with from one second to the next. So they like to mix it up, and that's what they did. But Mel Brooks was one of those people who needed, even if he did a lot of different casting, somebody from the core group's going to end up in the film in some way, shape, or form. They're either behind the camera or in front of the camera, and a lot of times in front of the camera. So Gene Wilder is one of those people, and I think he and Mel Brooks just had this really creatively productive relationship. I think they inspired each other. That's why they wrote together. You don't just write with anybody. You gotta have a meeting of the minds first.
Right. There's got to be some kind of a cohesiveness between you and the other person to inspire, and it's very apparent in the films that were released, and the ones that we aforementioned. Just very apparent that there was nothing but a very smooth, cohesive marriage of the minds.
Yes, very much so. Well, let's talk about Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, because to me, that's out of all the roles he's done, that's the most iconic one, and the one for which he will, I think, forever be remembered, and rightly so. Especially because that movie was subject to a remake.
Oh no.
Oh yes, and not in a good way.
Not in a good way.
I was not at all impressed. I mean, I think Johnny Depp is he's a good actor, but I think he does not always rely on the truth of the actor. I think he relies on doing caricature or doing, of affectations. That's the word I'm looking for. He relies on, in my view, affectations too much when he doesn't know what else to do.
Right.
And they become distractions in and of themselves. And I think the version of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and I can't remember if they called it Willy Wonka, maybe they just called it the Chocolate Factory, or I can't remember what they called his version, but it was very disappointing to me. I just, it was like too much money thrown at, it was a big budget movie, too much money was thrown at it, and these people did not get a good return on their investment. And part of the problem was that they had Johnny Depp doing this weird crap, affecting this very strange voice, the same voice he used in Alice in Wonderland, as it happened.
I know. I thought I was looking at the third version of that film.
Right, I know. It's like, is he still through the looking glass, or is he in a factory? I don't know.
And just to intercede for just a moment, it was called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
It was called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But he also just did this weird little kind of half smile, where he kind of, it's like I can't quite get the corners of my mouth to turn up because I'm so weird. No, not interested. at all. Don't really care about your physical issues.
And it's funny because the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, it was more of a whimsical movie.
Very
And,
whimsical. And it had
gave
heart.
You, and you're right. And it also gave you very clear and clean, clear cut phases of different tips, different antidotes,
Mm-hmm.
different things that they were trying to point out that children could follow to become better
Right.
people.
Yes.
So it had a rhyme and reason,
right.
Involved in it. And Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I was thinking this probably would have been better seen in Halloween. This was really, really kind of that bizarre kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but it wasn't, it paled in comparison.
And
totally when you're going to make this type of movie, it's going to be compared. And I'm not saying that all remakes are bad, because they're not. There are some remakes that are, if they're not better, they're interesting. And
no, not all remakes are bad, but this was a bad remake.
But this one was
that
bad.
one was a bad remake. Now let's go to the original. I remember, once again going to the movies to see Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and I didn't know what to make. I mean, like the beginning is a slow beginning, and you're kind of like, it kind of reminds me of The Wizard of Oz, where you've got all this exposition going on. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like, yeah, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, you have the factory, and then you kind of perk up because it's like you're wondering what this is all about. And when Willy Wonka first makes his appearance, Gene Wilder's Willy Wonka, he looks like this, very sort of taciturn is the word I'm looking for. Taciturn, not old man, but just this taciturn man, just very drawn in and very, irritable. And he's, all of these people are there because they've won the golden ticket, right. and like the kids are there, their parents are there, they've won the golden ticket, they're all so excited. And he comes on the scene in this purple coat and this top hat, and he's kind of like limping, like he's, like he has a cane and he's sort of limping, and he's walking very, very slowly. And you could literally see all the air being sucked out of the, I'm really excited. Oh God, this is going to be horrible. Who is this man? Oh my God, is he going to yell at me? And he just plays it out. I mean, he doesn't speed up. He doesn't try to hurry to, because the parents and the kids are so excited. He's controlling the show, and he's master of the domain there. And then when he gets to a certain point, and he does this like somersault, mm-hmm. and then jumps up, and with a big smile on his face, it's like, oh, he is excited. This is awesome, And I love that scene.
It's a combination of so many different things that make this movie work so well, mm-hmm. other than not just a superb acting by Gene Wilder. One of my favorite parts of the film, I'm a movie holic, I'm a movie buff, but I love music as well. Mm-hmm. And the pure imagination, that song is a song that I could listen to time and time again, and I have. When I'm sad, I've listened to the song every once in a while because it always perks me up, even though it is a very melodic and relatively slow-paced song. It still gives me that feeling of that I can conquer and do well if mm-hmm. I just use my imagination to propel me toward that thing that I wanted to achieve. And that's what I'm talking about. This movie just has so many cool parts and moments and sayings and verbiage that just is very inspiring if you're paying attention.
Right.
And Gene Wilder just facilitates that so well throughout the whole film. This to me is probably his best film.
Oh,
This
yeah.
to me is the film that you will remember always and keep Gene Wilder in your memory. The other films were whimsical and they're funny and they're actually very, very good as well. But I think this is the one that hits the mark as being a very, very memorable performance. And I love this movie.
And you know what struck me again, and a big distinction between this and the Johnny Depp caricature is what I would call it, is that Gene Wilder's approach to dealing with these children. It's like, you've got this, what could be a media frenzy here. That's part of the thing that's going on. And he's got a factory to run, and that really can't stop even for this. And he wants to make sure that the right child gets the appropriate rewards. And like all of that, again, is serious business. And I don't know that Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory can be called a comedy. It's more of a dramedy.
Another drama, maybe?
Comedrame, or I don't know. I'm not sure I'm not sure what it really melds. It really melds elements of both. But for a comedy, it's not like hugely funny, except for some slapsticky parts. And for a drama, it's not terribly, like, I don't know what dramas are. It doesn't take it
overly dramatic.
Right. It wasn't overly dramatic. So it sort of struck this middle ground. But I think what he did wisely, Gene Wilder, was he approached the character as, he's a businessman and he's a steward. Mm-hmm. And he also, he's the one who's responsible for how things go. And he also has to manage these unpredictable children and their unpredictable parents, all of whom are demanding in all kinds of different ways. And he approached that very seriously. And again, that was the right way. And when you had this real sort of juxtaposition between like some of the kids who were like, well, look at me. Yeah. Screaming and, running around and being really bratty and, I want this and I want that and I want this and I want that. And he would speak in these measured tones because I think, in hindsight, if I was the armchair quarterback, I would say he was doing that because he never lost sight of the fact that he was the person in power. And when you're in power, you don't have to yell.
Right.
When you're in power, you know that you're going to be able to get the result that you want. And so you don't have to prove anything. Mm-hmm. So he didn't have to prove anything to parents. He wasn't about, and I think that's a welcome thing to see, especially in this day of helicopter parents, overprotected children, parents going, I love my child to the moon and back, and I'll do anything for my child. And if anybody says anything against my child, then they'll be held to pay and blah, blah. And I don't care if my child is wrong. My child's always right. It's like in this kind of day and age, it's nice to see that where a grown-up is not only in control, but guess what? The grown-up is smarter than all the kids. And as you know, I'm about to go on a rant here, one of my pet peeves in movies, and it's something that and TV shows, and something that you see over and over again far too often, is this notion where somehow the adults are bumbling fools and the kids are really smart, and somehow because they're quote unquote pure of heart, which most decidedly a lot of them are not, but but for the sake of argument, let's just say they are. But just because they're pure of heart, that makes them smart? No, children are children, and a lot of what we call smart is really experience, and you can't get experience without getting older. And I really resent the notion that somehow you can be a child and somehow have all the experience and all the knowledge that somebody who worked very hard for 10, 15, 20 years got. You can't. It's a physical and a psychological impossibility. And it's not only unfair to adults who worked very hard and did the learning, did the work, it's also unfair to children because there's too much pressure on children to be adults.
Right.
And what I love about this film is that, I mean, you had adults who were acting like children. So, I mean, the parents were, in some ways were worse than the children. And then you had children who were acting bratty and ungrateful little brats. But Willy Wonka was the adult. He kept being the adult throughout the entire picture. And I loved, not the perfect adult. I mean, there were, there were times when, Charlie was like really concerned about how he was being treated, and rightly so. But for most of the picture, Willy Wonka and the way that Gene Wilder played him, he was the adult. He had the experience. He learned enough to be in charge, and he used his power wisely and well.
And not only that, but he taught the lessons. And as far as I'm concerned, we all should be doing what the Oompa Loompa do.
Right.
Oompa Doopa Doopity Doo. I've got another riddle for you. These are things that had to do with the behavior of these kids, had to do with the behavior of their parents. You have children who are so in control of their parents that it was role reversal.
Yes.
As what you're alluding to, role reversal. And so now you have parents who are worse than the kids who feel like they're, what's the word we use these days? I had it on the tip of my tongue. Privileged.
Yes, entitled.
Entitled, that's the word, thank you. Entitled to having these things. And, and talking about rants, I know you have your critical rants when we were talking about film and stuff, but your rants were nothing like these kids in the original movie. They were just horrific. And they're just, and in the midst of all that, you have this kid who's trying to figure out not just what's going on with them, what's going on with him and his grandfather, and what's going on with Willy Wonka, because here's a kid who doesn't think anybody's acting well and doing good. And he doesn't understand the motives that Willy Wonka has for the whole situation. But he learns as time goes on, we see that starting to develop and change. But Willy Wonka was really testing all of these families to see who was worthy of the true essence of this golden ticket. And the sad thing is, even prior to them getting to Willy Wonka's factory, when we know that the young man and his family were so very poor that his grandparents, both sets, had to sleep in the same bed. So we know that Charlie was just in a poor situation. Yet you wouldn't know it by Charlie. Charlie thought he was the richest and the most wealthy kid in the world. So we watched all this panic and frantic essence, people trying to find tickets, buying more chocolate than they had ever wanted to buy.
And wasting all of it.
Which was a great marketing ploy for Willy Wonka. But, and then finally getting the golden ticket. What was the true essence of the golden ticket? It was an opportunity to learn, grow, and understand how wealthy you are as an individual and a human being. And everyone else was so extreme, but it was sadly always to the right, the negative extreme. and being able to learn from all that. That's what they're portraying. That's what they're trying to get you to understand. And
Right.
they Mel Brooks, um, Gene Wilder, they were able to manifest that for us to see on screen.
Mm-hmm.
And another reason why this movie is so important and also so memorable.
Yes. Yes, I totally agree with what you just said.
And
Well said.
that's memorable too because we tend not to agree very much. But I appreciate that. Well, okay, I appreciate that too. I wanted you to come back to how we really are. But but yeah,
I'm back. I'm back, baby.
but all kidding aside, it just makes this movie that much more um, viable and still viable. You should have little kids watch this film.
Mm-hmm.
You should have adults
I was
watch
going
the
to
film
say, I
with the
think
children.
adults should watch this film too.
But especially if you have children or your aunt and uncle, you should watch this film with these kids so that you
Right.
can get a better understanding of how to deal with the children that are with you.
Right.
It's a should be like a learning tool in schools. This movie.
Yeah.
So it
Um,
was a great triumph to me for Gene Wilder.
yeah, it really was. It really was. I won't say I mean, I think you're right. That's probably his best film. It's not my favorite film by him. Like I said, my favorite film is Young Frankenstein, and probably both Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles. But this is a very, very good film. It's very watchable. It's very well done. It's very
Mhm.
well done. The production values are quite good. And this was probably a big budget movie. Large cast, because of the musical numbers and having to populate those numbers. Um, but it it never felt like, I mean, that movie never struck me like, oh, I'm watching a really big budget movie and that's why they have all this stuff here. Unlike The Grinch Who Stole Christmas with Jim Carrey, which is, don't even get me started on that one. But that was like, I mean, I don't care. I mean, I know it was like Ron Howard directed and he can do no wrong. Well, Ron Howard's made plenty of mistakes. This was one of them. And part of the issue with that movie was just somebody took huge buckets, laundry baskets full of money and just threw it at the
At the
studio and
Grinch.
said, make that movie, just make it. And all that struck me about that movie was that a lot of money changed hands for not much of a return on investment once again.
Mhm.
Whereas the cartoon on which this movie was based, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, was relatively just exponentially simpler.
Mhm.
And
Much more
it's just like, well, we'll have Boris Karloff do the voice of the Grinch and the voice of the narrator, and we'll have, we're not going to have a lot of voices. We don't have that big of a budget, and blah, blah, blah. And just beautifully, beautifully done. And this live
extremely
action,
successful.
yes,
Extremely
extremely
successful.
successful. And the live action version, remake, extended version was just, as far as I was concerned, it was a train wreck.
It was.
And I think some of that affected the Johnny Depp version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Somebody took bucketfuls of money because, I mean, I'm sure Johnny Depp got paid a great deal to be in that movie.
Sure.
And a lot went into makeup and a lot went into set design and production design and all this other stuff. And it's like, it rings hollowly. It just does. And the Gene Wilder version rings true every single time.
Every single time, without fail. I could watch that movie over and over again.
Yeah,
Um, I'm
very well done.
I'm glad that I was able to experience Gene Wilder in his prime, and especially the films that he put out.
Me
Um,
too.
there were belly laughs. Is a good way to say how to describe some of the more comedic movies like the Young Frankenstein and
Silver Streak,
Silver Streak,
Blazing Saddles.
You know, those films and their ilk. But Willy Wonka was just a myriad of combination of comedy, drama, theory, sleuthing. It married so many different facets of life that even though there was fantasy elements involved, all those fantasy elements did was teach you things.
Right.
And at the end of the film, you realize that there's so many different things that you're able to do, so many different things if you put your mind to it. If you stay strong on the path, you can achieve. And that's what this movie felt like to me the whole time. And I always felt better watching it at the end, and I always felt inspired to do not just the things that were typical that you're doing as you live your life, but also inspirational things. Inspired to write, inspired to do artistic or cultural things. And that's amazing from this movie that doesn't seem like when you first watch it, or not watch it, but when you first are introduced to the film, that you would get out of it. It's just really, really well done. And Gene Wilder was just spectacular in it. So I will miss him. Great.
He will definitely be missed. I know I will miss him. The world is a little less bright without his presence in it, but we're lucky that he graced us with as much time as he graced us with.
Now, another thing that a lot of people are not necessarily aware of, other than the fact that he was a wonderful screenwriter, was that he was also a novelist. He wrote a few books and even a memoir that came out back in 2005 with regard to his life and things he was hoping to leave. And so I think it's a good idea to try to, find those books that Gene Wilder's written and see what he's left us to ponder over. Well, I appreciate you hanging out with me, Karen. I think we're going to end our show right now.
Okay.
Thank you for everybody out there who is listening and viewing our little episode here of A Real Point of View. We appreciate you and thank you for doing that, and hope that things that we've said, things that we've mentioned, get you to take a look at Gene Wilder films and even his books.
Yes.
Thank you again for joining us here on A Real Point of View. Any parting words, Karen, before we get out of here?
No, I'm happy that we were able to spend this time talking about Gene Wilder. He's definitely, a worthy subject for this broadcast. I'm glad we were able to pay some homage to him. I mean, we didn't talk about all of the movies that he was in, but just sort of an overview hitting the highlights. But he had a storied, long, and brilliant career, and he was an amazing talent. And, I'm also happy that I was able to see him in his prime.
Thanks again, everybody. Have a good night.
Night, everybody.